Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome back to another StarCraft video. Now what I got for you today is a type of video that I used to record a lot more regularly a couple of years ago. If you subscribed to the channel back in like 2015, 2016 or so, you may recall, by the way, first off, thank you very much for still being around. I really appreciate it. You may recall the kind of videos where I analyzed my own replays. Now, I don't really do those very often anymore, mostly because I've been casting a lot of games and it always feels a little bit awkward to like compliment my own gameplay. But I figured let's take it back and let's talk about a game that I played myself recently. We're gonna be watching this game pretty much exclusively through my point of view. I'm gonna try and take you through my thought process, so hopefully some of you can take away something from this game. I want to point out the things that I did really well and also the things that I did poorly, so hopefully we can all improve. And if you have any feedback, let me know down below in the comment section on both the type of video that I'm recording right now as well as, of course, the gameplay, because I'm always looking to take that one into account. Alright, so this is a Zerg vs. Zerg that I played recently on one of my accounts called Dr. Drones. That's one of the accounts I'm currently playing on, or at the very least one of the nicknames that I am currently playing on. And I went up against the Zerg Lord. Now the Zerg Lord at the time was like rank 110 or so, I believe, on the European Grandmaster ladder. And he was right around, for those of you curious, I believe 5,750 MMR or so. So definitely a really high level opponent. Now, a lot of people don't really like Zerg vs. Zerg very much because it can sometimes feel a little bit like a coin flip. If you're opening up with a hedge gas pool like I'm doing right here, it can feel very vulnerable against super aggressive Zergling cheese. And there's no denying that sometimes that is the case. But when you think about it on paper though, since you're both playing with the same pieces, it is kind of like playing chess in a way. As long as you've got good amount of scouting information, it is usually the better player that ends up winning. Or at the very least, you know, sometimes obviously you do get unlucky, but, you know, at the very least, it is very much so a matchup that is based around skill. So I decide to go for a hedge gas pool and I get my Overlord to the other side of the map. Now, I think this is my first little bit of improvement that I can do. Now, I know not a lot has happened just yet, but let's talk about this for just a little bit. What I noticed is that a lot of the professional gamers don't just send their Overlord to the other side of the map to scout if it is a hatchery first. There's a couple other things you can do as well. Since I now know, judging by the amount of creep that is around here, right? We can see how far the creep has expanded from that hatchery. It is right around, I guess, you know, the line right here that we can take around the Vespian Geyser. If we compare that to mine as well, you can notice right here that his hatchery was done right around the same time as me. Which means that if we look right here at the timing of the queen, maybe his queen is gonna come out like 5 seconds earlier, but it's not gonna be out for another little while. So what I could do is send this Overlord forward just a little bit to see what he's making and whether or not he's getting any drones for the natural. Right now, I get to the other side of the map, I see that it's a hedge gas pool from my opponent, or at the very least the hatchery first, and I decide to send the Overlord back. I think what I should do, and this is one of the improvements I've been making a lot more lately, is leave the Overlord there for just a second longer to see these drones move from the high ground. Because seeing those two workers is a very big deal. I got something similar going on right here. My opponent, as you can see, is doing that exact move. This basically helps him get up to a better amount of knowledge about what it is I'm doing. Because if I've got one drone mining here, it means that in most occasions, I will not be going for a Zergling all-in. So that's one of the minor things that I definitely am incorporating into my play a lot more often, just because it is very critical when you are losing to a lot of early game Zergling cheese. So with the first Overlord aggression, or with the first Overlord, I guess not aggression, with the first Overlord moving across the map, try and see how far the creep of your opponent's hatchery has gone out, and also try and get a look at his mineral line. Now, don't stay there for too long. If the queen comes out and you lose the first Overlord, that's essentially game over. You cannot lose the first Overlord at a higher level of play. And then the second thing, of course, try and see if you can scout his second Overlord with your second Overlord. So, for example, if I were to see his second Overlord, you know, with the one that I've got right here, I can kind of know and realize whether or not there's going to be some Zergling cheese. Because judging by where he's putting it, it can definitely give you quite a bit of information. So that's the first little improvement there that I think is worth talking about. Man, I'm talking nerdy. I love this. I really enjoy talking about strategy. I know not everyone is necessarily interested in it, but this is one of the things that I really enjoy about playing StarCraft and about talking about StarCraft, because it's so strategic in a lot of these ways. Alright, so now that I know that my opponent went for a hatch gas pool, or at the very least very likely went for a hatch gas pool, I decide to go for a third base myself, and I'm sending some Zerglings here across the map. They are meant for scouting. I meet some of his Zerglings right here as well, and now that I've got my my drone going back into the gas, you may have noticed, by the way, for those of you curious, I pulled 2 drones out of the gas when the spawning pool finished to start up metabolic boost. Then I made one more drone, rallied it to the gas geyser, sent a drone towards the third, put down the third base, and then if you have that one drone that you make after pulling the drones out of gas to the gas, you should have exactly 50 gas to start up the bailing nest at the perfect time as well. Anyway, that's a little bit technical. It's one of the things that a lot of players have been doing as of late, but it's relatively minor and really... You know, it mostly feels like you're doing it for style points. But anyways, I get up my bailing nest right over here. Now, one of the things that I noticed from coaching people quite a bit in StarCraft is that the bailing nest placement has to be in a really peculiar spot. Some people ask, hey, Lowko, why the heck would you put your bailing nest near the front of your natural? What's the deal? Well, the thing is, if your natural gets overrun and you lose the bailing nest, it's game over anyway. It doesn't really matter all too much whether or not you put it in the main base or over here, because if you lose the natural, it's game over. You know, like you can't lose the natural. So instead, you basically use this bailing nest to create a bit of a choking point right here for the queen. So if I unpause, I believe I put the queen there. There we go. That's a perfect spot where the surface area around the queen is much smaller, so Zerglings can't really attack her nearly as easily, which is a really big deal, actually. I don't know if my opponent ends up doing something similar here as well. We can have a look at that in just a sec. But those little moves I found to be very valuable. Now notice here my opponent is taking a third in a somewhat unorthodox location. Not something you usually see players take it, but I'm feeling pretty good right now. I'm gonna go ahead and spend some time droning up. I'm actually a little late on this overlord. I just realized that. I make an overlord here at 34. That's a big deal. I was supposed to start up that overlord at 30. 30, 31-ish. Yeah, I now hit a small supply block. That's a rather big deal. Okay, very interesting. Didn't quite realize that is a mistake. You definitely want to make that overlord at 30, 31-ish. Alright, so I sent some more Zerglings here across the map. I made those just as, you know, just as a defensive measure. Now, I scout here, and I see something peculiar initially, right? I notice that his Zergling speed was not done yet when my Lings moved out. Now, it's not necessarily a big tell, but you do really want to try and keep that in mind. Your Zergling speed should finish up around the same time as your opponent. If he is skipping Ling speed... like a bell should be going off in your head that you should maybe get aggressive, or at the very least try and figure out what's going on, because if they skip link speed, the game can become very strange really fast. They might be going quick lair or anything along those lines, but you definitely want to try and keep an eye out for this. Now, one addition I've been making in my Zerg vs Zerg that I found to be extremely valuable, and if you're playing at like a higher level of play as well, I highly would recommend this. It's the timing right here of the evolution chamber. So I noticed Cyril do this in a lot of the games, but also a lot of other European Zergs. You want to try and get your first evolution chamber rather early on. This may seem like a relatively random timing, but this is in preparation of that mid-game switch. What is currently happening in the meta is that a lot of players don't really like going for the Ling Bane style as much. So at this level, it's almost as if there's a bit of a gentleman's agreement where you won't be flooding your opponent with Lings and Banes. And while I'm still sending out some Zerglings and I'm still making a couple of Lings and Banes here and there, I'm already going for the evolution chamber in anticipation of the Roach switch. So I start this one up, as far as timing goes, right around... I would say 45-ish supply. I noticed that Cyril usually seems to start it up right around like 43 to 46 or so supply. I don't think he's calculating it off of supply, but at the very least, that should be a good indication. He's probably judging it by the amount of drones that he gets. Now, because of this evolution chamber, I am more forced to play defensively. When you think about it, I'm spending one drone right here on making the evo chamber, plus the minerals that the evo chamber cost, plus I'm now also getting a third queen out, right? Plus the cost of the upgrade. So all of that combined kind of forces me into a more defensive posture, and I'm okay with that. It is just critical to keep in mind that that is the case. So getting that third queen right now is very helpful, because not only is it going to make it easier for me to get that third base up and running. Say, for example, my opponent gets aggressive. I can use that queen to shoot at some overlords. I can pull the queen from the main to maybe shoot at some of those banelings as well. There's a lot of variety that might be possible here. But going for the Evo Chamber right now and starting up the missile upgrade early, I found to be extremely valuable. Now, great scout there by my opponent. I think this is one of the critical improvements that I need to make in my play as well. You saw that one little Zergling trying to wiggle its way towards the main. That's a big tell. What it told him at this point is that it was also good for him to do something very similar. So notice right here, he's opting to go for the wall instead of like the safe queen. It doesn't really matter all too much, but it like shows for him that he's good to go ahead and take the Roach Warren. So I think this is a second improvement that I can make. First off with the Overlord Scout, but secondly with a Zergling Scout. I would say right around the same time as I put down that Evolution Chamber. So just simply split up 1 or 2 Zerglings and just run them around and see if you can get into your opponent's base. You may be able to figure out what is going on there. For example, the Evolution Chamber is going up, or you could see the timing of the lair or anything along those lines. So I think that's another improvement that I most definitely want to pick up. So first off, the Overlord Scout at the very first part of the game, setting that Overlord just a little bit further to scout the amount of drones for the natural initially. And then secondly, sending a Zergling around, and this is one of the things that the pro gamers do all the time, you know, to see what kind of build it is you're going up against. Now, since I know this looks to be a relatively passive game as far as Ling Bane goes, I'm feeling pretty comfortable here to go up towards the lair, to go up towards the Roach Warren here, and then the double gas too. I think I actually still have to start up the lair. There we go. And then the Roach Warren too as a follow-up very shortly. Right around the time that the lair is about a third or so of the way done. I'm trying to do a little bit of damage, but when my opponent took this third base, it almost is like an indication that he doesn't want to play too aggressive. When you think about just simply the map layout, there's only a couple of ways for me to get into that third base area. It's not very easy, and I decide to go back home. Alrighty. So, you may notice here, right, that this is a relatively passive game of StarCraft 2 in the early game. And I know what some of you are thinking, like, Lowko, what the heck do I do if my opponent is playing way more aggressive? What is going on if my opponent plays super aggressive here and I don't really know what's up? Usually, when it comes to Ling Bane fights, the only thing you can really do to get better at it is just practice it 1,000 times. That seems like bad advice, but the only way I personally found to get better at microing Zerglings against the Banelings and then microing all of these engagements is just by practicing. You gotta get that muscle memory and the macro mechanics down. That's basically it. You just have to try and practice it 1,000 times. And at a certain point, you recognize, wait a second, I'm actually pretty good at this Zergling Baneling micro. I can transition towards the mid game a lot more often. And I think once you reach a certain level, though, once you reach that level, a lot of your opponents are going to be like equally good at the Ling Bane micro too. So you sort of have this agreement where you don't get all too aggressive, because I know right now, if I were to flood the map with Zerglings, my opponent would just hold, and I would be very far behind economically. So that's the reason why we are playing as greedy as we are here. Because I know if my opponent pushes right now, I can morph a couple of Banelings defensively. I can start then reinforcing with more Zerglings. I can pull the queens that I've got. I've got 3 queens, right? I can pull those to attack move on his Banelings and just snipe them out of the engagement really rapidly. If my opponent decides to play aggressive, I should be able to hold it. Another important thing to note is that with the timing right here of this Evolution Chamber, not only do you opt in right here essentially for a good mid-game, it also actually helps out against different kinds of Zergling aggression. So there's, for example, Zergling pushes where they focus on +1 melee or +1 armor really early on. I think going for the +1 missile here sort of makes it so that I can get this upgrade done by the time that that push would hit. So that's like a nice little coincidence, I suppose. Getting +1 missile rather on your roaches, and you're going up against unupgraded Zerglings, or at the very least no Zerglings with Carapace upgrades. It makes it so that the roach is 2-shot Zerglings rather than 3-shot, and that's a big deal. So say for example, if your opponent has like 20 Zerglings and he's surrounding 5 roaches, I'm pretty sure without upgrades, the roaches would just simply lose. However, with +1 missile upgrade, I wouldn't be surprised if like 3 or 4 or so of them stay alive. It's that big of a difference. So it's a good timing. So once again, put down the Evo Chamber right around 45 supply or so. Now, once again, I want to compliment my opponent, right? Look at what he's continuously doing. And this is one of the big things that I need to start playing a lot more often. He keeps on running in these Zerglings, and he's not doing so at random. He's running into Zergling towards the 3rd base to check out how many drones are mining here. So that sort of makes it that he can check if I'm planning to go for a 2-base all-in, right? Because if he would have not seen any drones right here, I can guarantee you that my opponent would start making non-stop army, maybe some spine crawlers and all that, right? And that's a big deal. That's a really important little tell there, and I should definitely be doing that as well. Now, the chances of your opponent going for that 2-base roach play are relatively slim, but you need to be checking for it, right? And I think I definitely can make a rather big improvement right there. I think the majority of the improvements we've seen so far have mostly just been scouting, and maybe that's actually the main thing that I should be working on. Because sometimes I do find myself getting caught off guard, I guess, with my pens down. I do get the Zergling in right now, but I feel like it's a little late. Because I'm checking right here whether or not he's going for the lair. I found out that there is a lair. I found out that there's a roach warren and an evo chamber near the front. And I know that it's safe, but I don't really know the workers here at the 3rd. I should really be keeping that one in mind. And by the way, this is the reason why we check replays. When you're playing the game, you're so caught up in the action that usually it's hard to learn anything. When you're looking at the game objectively a couple days later, like for example what I'm doing right now, it usually becomes much easier to be a little bit more focused on just simply improving. And I know that some of you dislike it, by the way, when I pause the game this much, but I want to try and explain what is going on to the best of my abilities. Okay, so notice once again, the Zerg Lord gets up towards a lair, he immediately morphs in an Overseer, and he starts scouting around. Once again, right, if there's one thing that is absolutely critical here of his play, is the amount of scouting that he's doing. He's really doing an excellent job with exactly that. Now, he's also trying to get some of these Zerglings in. He does decide to turn back around when he sees all my army. But there's no denying that this is an Overseer Scout, once again, that is very, very valuable. He even got himself Overlord Speed, so I start mine up a little bit later. But there's no denying that this is still, once again, giving him all the information that he needs. So he's looking for the amount of workers, roughly, that I have. All right. So if you go back to my base here for just a little bit, you may have noticed that right when my lair finished, I went for the roach speed upgrade. And right when I finished my first upgrade, I got myself another evolution chamber, and I want to start a +2 missile as well as +1 carapace. Now, I could try and play a little bit aggressive once my roach speed finishes, or at the very least I can make it so that I can move out across the map if I really want to. So there we go. This is going to allow me to start double upgrading my roaches, which is a nice way of getting some more value in. I do get some links here inside of his base, which is good. I check out roughly what's going on. I realize, hey, there's a second evo for my opponent too. He manages to snipe my 4th base, which I'm trying to get at this point. And while I'm also trying to hide some of the Zerglings here in the corner of this base to potentially morph them into Banelings later on, I managed to snipe a couple drones there. So I think I killed, 7 drones actually in the grand scheme of things. That's quite nice. Now, once again, I'm forced to remake this 4th. And I want you to pay attention here to how effective my opponent is with the relatively small army that he's got. He's continuously pulling me into different directions. So my first major improvement was scouting, right? Scouting with Zerglings, scouting with Overlords, and scouting with Overseers. I think that's one of the major improvements that I can make. Secondly, though, I think I can work quite a bit on army positioning. So if you back up just a little bit, you can notice here that I'm going for the 4th base, right? Is this the 4th base? Is this right before I take the 4th? Yeah, I think it is. Now notice what I'm doing, right? Since my opponent has been pushing on this side of the map here for a while, I've got my roaches also positioned there. I've got a couple of roaches right here near my natural to try and deal with any potential run-bys. However, my 4th base, which is essentially going to be my lifeline throughout the mid-game, is completely unprotected. I think another important improvement that I can make here is position at least some army, in particular when you got a little bit of creep spread out, you got some scouting with overlords on the map and all that, some army over at that 4th. Because what happens in this game is that my opponent manages to come in, snipe the base, and I'm now in less of an ideal spot. Your drones are under attack. Oh my god, I think that was Tasis and Artosis there. as my opponent's announcer. Alright, so we're back to the faster game speed right here, just a regular game speed. The one that we played a multiplayer version of the game in. But you can see that I'm once again forced to retake that base, and it's a minor improvement, but those kind of things do add up. Now what I decide to go for in this game is a Roach Burrow play. So after I finish up Roach Speed, I decide to go for the Burrow upgrade, so the Tunneling Claws as well as the Roach Burrow. And look what I'm doing, by the way, with my army. I make the same mistake twice. I make the same exact mistake twice for no reason. This does not provide any value. You can see my opponent's Overseer comes in. He scouts around where my roaches are positioned, and the Zerglings manage to arrive here once again. Not a very big fan of how I'm playing it, and as you can see so far, I'm not at that great of a position here. As a matter of fact, all things considered, I think I could be at a much better spot, because I already made a couple drones for that newly acquired base, and the base never got there. Now, finally, I leave some roaches there, now that I noticed that his army is moving across too, but I obviously could have done that, like, 2 minutes ago, right? I could have prevented myself from canceling and ever from being oversaturated. Because right now, I've got too many drones on the bases that I've got, and it's just not very efficient. Now, the one thing I do have going for me here is that Tunneling Claws upgrade. I found Tunneling Claws to be my absolute saving grace in Zerg vs. Zerg lately. It's really good, and it does allow you to get a lot of value in. Now, this time around, you can see my opponent does push up that ramp. I think that was a bit of an overextension on his end. I managed to snipe some of these roaches, and I'm still protecting my 4th base as well. Can I finally start sending some units there too. Now, I've been critical of how I'm playing up to this point quite a bit, right? However, I'm quite proud of how this next moment worked out. So if you go for the first Evo, right around 45 supply, then you go for a lair and double gas a little while later, Roach Warren, and then once the first Evo chamber upgrade finishes, you make a second Evo, you go double upgrades. Once the lair finishes, you go for the Roach speed upgrade, Glio Reconstitution, and then once Glio finishes, you go for Burrow, as well as Tunneling Claws. Now, that all just finished up. You can see that my army is rather big. I've got 116 supply. While my 4th base was building here, I've mostly just been making non-stop army for quite some time. And what I get to do right now is focus on this Roach play and these run-bys. So notice how I'm queuing up a couple of run-bys here already. These roaches are essentially there to figure out what's going on. And I'm sending units in every single direction. Now, once again, if you use the all army hotkey, not only is your Overseer scouting going to be impossible, but it's also going to be very difficult to really get any value off whatsoever. And I got roaches tunneling to pretty much every single direction. Now, one thing you can do is right when you unburrow with those roaches is push forward with your main army. And I found this to be extremely efficient. So a couple roaches right now inside of my opponent's main base. I'm shoving with my main army into the direction of his 3rd. I've got units right now inside of his natural, and I'm once again tunneling, or I guess I'm just walking a small group right here from the match, or from my 4th base towards his 4th base. Now we get to move forward, and I get to snipe a big chunk of his army, which is out of position. Decide to move some of these units back in the direction that they were going in the first place. Split off a small group of my roaches to deal some more damage, and we're still hitting him at every single angle. 3rd base ends up falling, and we all of a sudden, in like a split second, are everywhere. Now, I want you to guess, how many workers do you think went down at this point? Because we didn't really look at the fight of the workers, right? And every single time this happens to me, a nice little run by the way here from my opponent, but every single time I do this kind of play, I always underestimate the amount of workers that died. 35 workers. Where did it just go? Well, it's just these couple of tunneling clawed roaches. It's pretty intense. It's just a couple of them. Well, I killed some, I guess, with the Zergling run by in the early part of the game, but still, like, it's very significant. And I think a lot of people do not play this kind of style nearly as much as they should, because that was just me all of a sudden popping my head out, right, with a couple roaches in all his bases, shoving forward with the main army, and that was kind of game. Now, I do wanna point out that I think I was gonna lose my own 3rd base here. Still, don't mind the run by though, obviously, because he's sniping my base and I keep most of the drones alive. I already have another base here where I can transfer those workers if I need to, and obviously my reinforcements should be able to eventually finish this up. So I'm happy with my tunneling claw play. I'm really happy with my upgrade play, and I'm really happy with the way that I approached the early game. My main improvements, once again, are scouting as well as unit placement. This is something that you can only really learn through trial and error. So when you're improving in StarCraft, just keep in mind that half of the game is losing. The ladder is quite literally designed to make you lose half your games. And sometimes when you're losing a game or you're winning a game, try and look at the replay and be as objective as you possibly can. Look at what's going on and try and figure out where you could have improved. Sure, this game was a win, but I think in just the sheer basics of the game, my opponent actually played better. His build order looked a little bit more on point. His scouting was substantially better. And while he just barely was caught with his pens down right here, that's a relatively easy fix for him to make, right? Now, obviously, StarCraft 2 is never a perfect game. You will never really find an opponent that's going to be playing perfect, right? It's always the first guy to mess up, usually, who is the one that ends up losing the game, right? But I just wanted to emphasize that because I think a lot of people get demoralized when they play StarCraft and they lose matches. I think for all intents and purposes, my opponent actually played a little bit better than me. It may not seem that way, but I think he played a little bit better than me. He was completely aware of exactly what it was I was doing. He was just caught with his pens down against a couple of burrowed roaches, and they all of a sudden sniped like a thousand drones. But his scouting was on point. His play was really, really solid. And while I won the game, there's no denying that there was a ton of room for improvement. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. Leave me any feedback you may have down below in the comment section of the video as well. I would love to hear it. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile or write. A special shout out to the Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for helping out the channel. But for now, I hope to see you once again in the next one.